Usually when it comes to me and the general consensus of a Godzilla movie, I'm pretty much in line with a lot of other people. So I'm mostly like this. This movie right here is an exception where I'm kind of like this from a lot of other fans. Mothra vs. Godzilla came out in April of 1964, the first of two Godzilla movies released in the same year, and this year we're actually going to have two Godzilla movies released at the same year also, the two sequels to Planet of the Monsters. But anyway, with Mothra vs. Godzilla, this movie is not only a sequel to King Kong vs. Godzilla, but a sequel to Mothra as well. The plot is that a mysterious egg has washed up on the shore of Japan, and suddenly an evil business tycoon takes the egg and tries to show it off as an amusement park attraction. But the egg is soon revealed to be Mothra's egg. How Mothra was able to lay something that's bigger than her entire body is really something that I don't think I want to know. But anyway, the twin fairies arrive, played once again by the Peanuts from the first movie, and they plead for the businessmen to return Mothra's egg. They fail, so they suddenly approach a news reporter played by Akira Takarada, his photographer played by Yuriko Hoshi, and a scientist played by Hiroshi Koizumi, who is not playing the same character that he played in the original Mothra. Strange. But anyway, the twins tell this trio about the egg, and the trio tries their best to try to get the egg back to Mothra. Unfortunately, though, Godzilla is once again back in Japan, and that soon puts the egg in greater danger than it already is. Mothra vs. Godzilla is often regarded as one of the best of the entire series, not just within the original Godzilla series, but all the movies in general. And I never understood why. I don't think it's a bad movie, but there's just something about Mothra vs. Godzilla that just doesn't really click for me the way some of the other movies do. That's what I said in my original review 5 years ago, but I was reviewing that movie based off memory. And since I'm watching all the Godzilla movies in prep for these reviews, I went into Mothra vs. Godzilla with an open mind, a complete blank slate, because I wanted it to feel like a first impression all over again. And when it starts out and it keeps going, I'm like, yeah, this is one of the best. But by the time the movie ended, I was like, no, I feel the exact same as I did before. Let's talk about the good first, because this is not a bad movie overall. I'm not going to say it's a bad movie. It's once again directed by Ishiro Honda, and because of that, his characters are very charming and likable. He's kind of, for me, like the Steven Spielberg of Japan. Whenever you watch some of the older Spielberg movies like Jaws, Raiders, Close Encounters, Jurassic Park, there's something about his characters that are just so charming and likable, even if they're not fully developed like some others. And with Ishiro Honda's Godzilla movies, I really get that impression. You have Akira Takarada in this movie, who hasn't been in a Godzilla movie since the original. He does a really good job, and the dynamic that he has with Yuriko Hoshi as his photographer is really good. They make a great duo, and the comedic moments between the two of them is actually pretty subtle. It's not a full-fledged comedy like King Kong vs. Godzilla was. This one's played a little more seriously, and because of that, it repeats a similar theme that King Kong vs. Godzilla attempted to do, but this movie succeeded in. Because Mothra's egg is being taken by greedy businessmen, the movie plays into the theme of how corporate greed can really be a problem for everyone around it. Whereas King Kong vs. Godzilla kind of abandoned that theme once the monsters started fighting. This one really pulls it all the way through. Because the businessmen will not get rid of Mothra's egg, the natives of Infant Island refuse to let Mothra fight Godzilla and save the entire nation of Japan, just based on the actions of two individuals. And it's because of our main heroes, when they travel to Infant Island, that they convince the natives to think otherwise. Like, look, just because two people have done something that you don't like at all doesn't mean that the rest of us should suffer at all, because innocent people, men, women, and children are dying because of Godzilla, and you're just standing by and not doing a thing based on the actions of only two people. So it's really good, and Yuriko Hoshi delivers a really moving speech on Infant Island that kind of drives this point home. And once again, it does play into Ishiro Honda's theme of unity, where everyone kind of comes together to face a common threat, and once again, it is Godzilla. Speaking of Godzilla, the suit is once again redesigned. It's a lot slimmer than it was in the last movie, and it would be kind of the more default weight for Godzilla, if that makes a lot of sense. All the Godzilla suits throughout the rest of the Showa era would be this slim. And his entrance in the movie is actually one of the strangest. No, actually, I take that back. One of the strangest would indicate that there is an entrance for him that's even weirder. Oh yeah, I forgot about that right there. Let's stay with the movies. Within the movies themselves, this is the strangest entrance that Godzilla's ever made. He's buried underneath sand in a dried up ocean bed. And it's a bizarre entrance. Even when I watched it for the first time, I was like, why was Godzilla underneath all the sand? It's strange, but once again, the action scenes and special effects are really well done. The fight scenes between Mothra and Godzilla are actually pretty brutal and savage. There's a lot of quick action. There are a lot of use of puppets between Mothra and Godzilla that are shot really close and look a bit silly. But this is actually a pretty intense fight, and Mothra really does prove to be one of the biggest challenges for Godzilla, not just in this movie, but for the entire series in general. Mothra has always been one of Godzilla's toughest opponents. Akira Ifukube once again does the score, just like John Williams does all of Spielberg's scores, and it's another great score. Because this score was not altered in America or removed altogether, this was the first movie where Americans finally heard the iconic Godzilla theme. And it should be noted that Akira Ifukube did not score the original Mothra, so he adds his own touch to Mothra's character, but it still maintains the fantasy element that made the first movie work so well. For example, the piece of music that plays at the Sacred Springs on Infant Island with the Peanuts singing is gorgeous. It's a beautiful piece that he would once again use in another Godzilla movie decades later. Now, I'm praising this movie left and right, and rightfully so, because the first 2/3, I would say, is great. It's one of the best things that the Godzilla series has to offer. So why do I feel the way I feel? Well, it all comes around to the third act. When Mothra is killed during her fight with Godzilla, and it's not that Godzilla necessarily kills her, it's more like she dies of old age, because the Twin Fairies reveal that if Mothra goes to fight Godzilla, she's not going to return to Infant Island. She's using up all her strength, and she's going to die defending her egg and the nation in general. So after Mothra dies, the movie hits a lag, and the pacing is incredibly slow. When it comes to Mothra's egg hatching, it takes a long time for that to happen, and part of it is because it's intercut with sequences of the Japanese Self-Defense Force trying to stop Godzilla. And admittedly, those scenes are fun, but it just makes the egg hatching scene even more tedious to watch, because it just could have been one whole thing and we were done. But because it's intercut, you're just waiting and waiting and waiting for Mothra's egg to hatch. And I also had a problem with the ending of the movie, the big final battle, because it does delve into the cliched, we have to save the children. Oh, won't somebody please think of the children? A group of children are trapped on an island that Godzilla is headed towards. So our main heroes have to go save the children and the school teacher that's with them, while the two Mothra larvae are busy fighting Godzilla. The fight between Godzilla and the larva is embarrassing. This is ultimately the main reason why I just don't love this movie the way everyone else does, because the final battle where Godzilla loses to two newly born infant caterpillars is ridiculous. He could have easily annihilated these two larvae, but he had such a struggle with it, and just to see Godzilla lose in that fashion is really sad. It's truly an embarrassment for Godzilla, especially when you consider what's come afterwards and how tough Godzilla is. So that's ultimately the reason why I'm not in love with Mothra vs. Godzilla, but I can really acknowledge what it gets right. Because the theme of corporate greed is followed through, unlike with King Kong vs. Godzilla. The fight scenes are still a lot of fun. It's just great to see Godzilla destroy shit. The characters are charming. The music is fantastic. It's overall a good movie, but not a great movie. Because of that third act, I can't really go above and beyond and saying it's a great movie, but it's still not a bad Godzilla movie in the slightest. Now, in terms of this movie's release in America, this actually wasn't heavily altered. After King Kong vs. Godzilla and until The Return of Godzilla in 1984, all the Godzilla movies were never heavily altered. All the music stayed in there. There's no added scenes with American actors. There is one added scene in the American version for Mothra vs. Godzilla, and that's the Frontier missile attack. And this wasn't something that the Americans filmed just for their version. This was something that the Japanese film crew actually filmed themselves. It was actually in the trailer for the Japanese version, but it was cut because it involves a bunch of US Navy vessels shooting missiles at Godzilla, which meant they were shooting on Japanese soil. And I think even though it's been 2 decades after World War II, there's still a little bit of anxiety about that sequence, just showing that in Japan. So it was edited in as an exclusive scene for the US version, and it's a pretty damn good sequence. The special effects are great, and when they show animated missiles hitting the dirt, it's so well timed, and it just really shows how much of a force of destruction Godzilla is, where you can throw everything at him, he keeps on walking. No fucks given at all. The only other alteration that the US version has is that it was retitled to Godzilla vs. the Thing, which doesn't make sense because Mothra is the Thing. You're like, okay, here's Godzilla, here's Mothra, now where's the Thing? And one of the characters goes, oh look, the Thing! And it shows Mothra, I'm like, that's the Thing? You mean this whole time Mothra was the Thing? Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but overall, this is actually one of the more tolerable US versions of a Godzilla movie because it was never heavily altered. It was just a dub, a title change, and a new sequence that was actually filmed in Japan. And those are changes that I can definitely appreciate. Low-key, that stay faithful to the original version. And from this point on, until the return of Godzilla, I won't be talking about the US version unless it's a neat little trivia bit. So yeah, that's my review for Mothra vs. Godzilla. Again, while I think it's a really good movie, I don't think it's one of the best. But tomorrow, we're going to be talking about the second Godzilla film released in 1964, and what I consider to be one of the best, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. So until then, I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on the movie, if and when you've seen it. And as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you, there's only one.